It's January 8th, 2022. So last night I put up grandtourideas.com, which was the premise of New Year's 2021, saying that I was going to put together that. So I thought, well, kicking out this new year, I don't want to fall behind on my ideas. So that's a work in progress. And I'm contemplating that, so I put together 4 parts in the initial area, which you'll see on the website, grandtourideas.com. About existing in the MEST. Let me go this way so you don't have that fan behind my head. I hope you can hear me okay and everything. It's a student on my laptop. I'm going to arrange my setting better for later during the year. You remember back in the old days, I had my Success Club, my other alter ego, Mike Rich. I've kind of gone on to become a sort of a pseudo-philosopher. But anyway, this was my New Year's success, which the video is still available. Not the whole thing I did way back when, but you can get excerpts of it at newyearsuccess.com. newyearsuccess.com. So plug for that, but really off to the races here. Okay, so in the last video that I created, I talked about the MEST. So we're getting back to ontological philosophy, to looking at structures and studying in my conception of the way that we're being. And so in my hope or goal is that we wake up from what I call the mass trance, the distraction of society that's really keeping us from our potential. And we see it all around us. I gotta go this way, I think. No, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. Again, I'll have a better setup. I got so many places I could do this at, but this is quiet and it's convenient in this room. Okay, so the MEST is an acronym which stands for matter, energy, space, and time. And if you talk to any physicist, that is basically the construction of the universe. If you look at the physical plane, what the components are, and you can go into each component, what's matter, what's energy, space, and time. But I like to use acronyms, so we have MEST. So we're existing within the MEST. I mean, that's really it. Without the MEST as the backdrop, matter, energy, space, and time, we do not exist. So my analogy is that, well, what's in the MEST and our ability to recognize it is the I. It's an I factor. So we're adding to the MEST an I. So I can recognize the MEST, but also the MEST is allowing my existence. So somehow there's some kind of capacity, which is the C, I see, that allows me to do things within the MEST and to exist and to be able to, we've done in our world. Maybe I should take this off. Excuse me, I'm going to eventually have to get my hair done. But it's way post-COVID. I ought to. So the idea here that there's a conduit, that I see is also sort of, it's allowing as a channeling to me to this I to deal with the MEST. And this I is intelligence, right? It's the interaction, it's the ability to sort of have this intention with the MEST. So I, whatever you interpret this to be. And so this is really important in the construction of the philosophy or the ontology, because we have to have a foundation, a basis for things to move forward, because there's definitely some kind of effect in both areas. And there's no dimension I'll explore in the future. It's like, well, if this is some kind of partition, what's behind it, or what's the generator of it? So this morning I was kind of picturing it more as a fan, like a 4-panel fan. And if we could put a label on each of the 4 panels, it would be MEST, matter, energy, space, and time. And this driver then is spinning the fan that's creating the MEST as itself, as my acronym. So this in reality is our backdrop. It really is what informs what we could say true reality, because without it, we don't have anything to go with to acknowledge this level of existence. But the fact that the I can interact with it, there is some kind of interpretation happening, and also an engagement ability through this conduit, so that we can create matter, forms, deal with energy, work within our space, and live in this time. So this is an important thing. It's really wondering, you see some concepts of it here and there, but I don't think anyone's ever really dealt with it in the way that I'm attempting to. So I don't know. Some people are going to say, yeah, whatever. But all right. So that's that part. Now the addition, what I got excited about this morning was a layering in the other component of grandtourideas.com is this entity that lives within the MEST. Now you could say that's us. But what I want to contend with is that, well, we have this material aspect of matter, energy, space, and time from the physics perspective. And then I propose to you that we also have, from a psychic or psychological aspect of how this I, depending on how intelligent it is it's dealing with the matter, energy, space, and time in this certain dimension where it kind of has an off-putting. So we have the physical hardcore of matter, but then we also have the psychological matter of concern. What's the matter, man? Something's the matter. So we're dealing with this on this eye level. So in the process that something is not quite right because we don't recognize it, we don't have the ability to sort of acknowledge the world that we're in, because we just, if you look at Heidegger's terminology with das Ein is thrown into the world. Well, I don't, without any choice, without anything. I think there's another comprehension that I'm talking about beyond this fan of the MEST that's generating things. And so in some way we have this option for participation, which we have some agreement that we are here and now. And whether we're fully awake to it is this acknowledgement of consciousness that I'm striving to describe and achieve through this awakening process of becoming a bit more attuned of where we're at, how we're being. And it goes beyond anything that we've been before in the past. Now, it could be just maturity, we're growing up and becoming a bit more wise and aware. Well, what could it be that could be instrumental in our way of being, particularly on a societal level, so that we get out of our stuck stories, what I describe as the mass trance that's limiting our ability to sort of have the desirable, equitable, sustainable future we really truly desire, right? Coming from the core, from our heart. We want to be able to provide for the future, particularly for the next generation and their abilities, so we don't just leave them this messed up situation that we're in. And so this I aspect has to do with matters of concern, energy depletion, or energy loss, and it could be emotional instability. And that then informs a spatial context that informs our time. And if you layered the MORB, so this construction of identity, I think this theory of mine is really sort of, and this is something I came up with late 90s, early 2000s, where I understood that this was MORB, M-O-R-B, another acronym. It's what my formulaic theories are. The MORB, M-O-R-B, stands for the modus operandi of rational behaviors contrasted in the MEST. So there's a juxtaposition here, because MORB is trying to make its way in the MEST. And at the same time, MEST is attempting in some way as its backdrop. It allows sort of an environment and a foundation for this MORB analogy to exist. And as an identity, it's a bit misconstrued, because the MORB, the modus operandi of rational behavior, is trying to exist. And so if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom longest basis to survive, right? You need shelter, and clothing, and food, and conditions that allow for existence. So it will get what it wants. And given that we've evolved from whether it was the amoeba or cave person to where we are now, something is still left maybe in the reptilian brain that has a way of its being through its MO, the modus operandi. And for its guise to exist, to be accepted, it has to appear rational in the way of its being. Or you could look at RB as being, instead of rational behavior, it is just relational being in the way that we are. So if we contrast this, the MORB, the MORB, against the MEST, MEST, we do see that the modus, right, has to deal with matters of concern, right, or the mind, okay? And then the operations really contrast with that energy. It has to be within space, whether you call it emotional motility, to be able to exist within this realm for it to function. So in that way, rationality or relationships are spatial in this dynamic. And the way of being, getting back to Heidegger, has to also be in how we are in time. Being in time is great work. His opus, Magnus Opus, is great work. So I thought that was something to share, because for me, even though I've had these ideas and I'm putting it together in the grandtourideas.com, I never put the two together like that, like the MEST and the modus operandi, rational being, sort of having this interlocking thing. I just sort of saw them as two entities. The MEST as a backdrop, and the functioning of MORB existing within for its ability to exist and to be in the world. Okay, so that's interesting, because what I'm looking for us to achieve, and we'll talk about this in the future ones, is the contrast of our being, so that we have higher states or uplifted states relative to ultra being. And that's my formula, UBE3, which I talk about. It's the core thing. UBE3, ultra being, an excellent example of enlightenment, is to be able to express it, and is the practice of being present in a way that allows things to be pristine, so that there is this flow. And this upliftment allows sort of modus operandi to sort of really evolve or dissipate into something that's higher, so it's no longer needed as a crutch or a robotic way of living. So the mass trance, we awaken from this into a premise that, we are sort of masters of the moment. So this creation level of MEST then also is something else. So that's something to explore, because I'm still looking at examining this realm and what would be the driver of the fan. So the only other addition to share is that I thought, well, quite a bit of writing, whether you go to Hegel or Kant, they talk about the Geist, a German word, and it's comparable to spirit. So you have a Zeitgeist, spirit of the time, related to the 60s, or what you might be feeling living in today's day and age. The Geist, it could be filtered just in our word of interpretation of spirit, but it really is lacking for what the German meaning is, because it is something that's upflowing, like a geyser, present sort of like the Holy Ghost, given to its Christian analogies of the Holy Ghost, perhaps, but also something that's informing as a Geist that's blowing through. So in this analogy, I'm trying to figure this out to add it, because obviously there is sort of the spirit of the times that we live in, and I think there's something to capture here within my own philosophy to explain things a bit better. So what I'm looking at in this fan, and this is something really just a day or two, I came up with, that this matter, energy, space, and time, looking at 4 panels of a fan, something that's driving, we have this sort of Geist, something that is the spirit of our time, that's different than if we went back in time 100 years ago, right, or 1,000 years ago. There would be a feeling of that time, but also what's informing it creates this sort of MEST. And so I guess the other component would say, like, oh yeah, good job, Mike, is that we have what I describe as a metasphere. So we all kind of have this analogy talking about like social atmosphere, the climate, what's going on in today's world is, now in terms of just not a climate change, or atmosphere is talking about the whether or not we're going to do something and evolve as a species. The metasphere is sort of the feeling of our engagement. It could be in a room. And I studied this in my community conversations dissertation, because I needed to come up with something like, as groups come together for deliberative dialogue, and they really have not necessarily a confrontation, but really an engagement that's a deep dialogue. Something is formed that's felt, and it could be in the exchange of things. And I have a new work called lovingconversations.com, loving conversations, where to me, I'm loving the conversation because it's so great. We have connectivity happening, and the interactivity, to me, is like, wow, that's everything. But also how to have that loving conversation have a breakthrough, where some situation, it's impeded having that kind of connection in the past. How do we move forward so we've regenerated something that's really of essence, that we both can tap into, and let's go of whatever the demeanor was, which is the past impedance. Now, maybe something needs to still get worked through and recognized, and we want to be responsible in this arena. That's what's showing up on this particular level of conscious intelligence is, and recognizing these MEST aspects. So in this arena, we're able to be better informed participants. And in that way, we're wholly informed, whole-brained, coming from our heart, and really an emptiness that's allowing for things to be in the way that they are, so we can better handle them and deal with them. And this is an intelligence then that can do quite a bit with this MEST. And looking at this generator of what this Geist then is, we are seeing it as the fan is running the universe, we could say. And if you look at contemporary physics, we could look at the backside of the fan, maybe that string theory. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a physicist. I'm really not in any contemporary way trained as a philosopher. But I just have these ideas. And I'm trying to not tie it into necessarily religious osity or other things like that, because I just want to have it sort of from the premise of observation. What is it that we're experiencing, phenomenology, but being able to take it in a constructive manner that is helpful and informative to a conscious community, and then becomes revealed in our conversation. And that was my dissertation, communityconversations.com. And that's taken it to a really, really deep level, to where we have this connectivity now that we can go, wow, let's explore it deeper. And we're just so excited about it, because something's being revealed, and we explore it together. So it could be a yin and yang thing, opposite views of things, but your perspective is just as valuable as someone else's. So the minority report opinion is really informing us. And that's the key thing, because what we're not seeing is perhaps the key that unlocks the whole dynamic. And people who are stuck in what I describe as the vlog which holds back the consciousness, that keeps it morbid, and the ID in the MORB, M-O-R-B, the modus operandi of rational behavior, the ID is internal dialogue. And as long as I, in this construction of this messed up universe, have sort of the wrong take on things of matter of concern and, energy, constructed emotional distraught and space invasion and time theft. Wow, man, you're going to get stuck in that. What do you call it? So I call it the vlog, and the vlog is sort of this disorientation. And this is a real important word in my thing, because we don't want to have dis as best as possible. We can deal with this, and dis would be invited to the conversation as long as it's allowing or it's dissipation or disappearance, dissolution. So the dissipation is important, but as long as we have, and it's important in some areas to divine this. When I talk about divine is filtering this, because, I'm not going to be stuck in my position on my ideas, because I'm really interested in other people's inputs, because it helps me expand the horizon. I get greater clarity on my own thinking processes. So if I'm stuck in this vlog, and I'll explain that acronym in a second, and become very disoriented, then I become oppositional. I couldn't take the criticism. If my ego is not involved with this, then I'm open to hearing and to really have deep listening to where something is revealed to me. And I don't have to necessarily accept it. But yet, if I'm listening to it, I can at least address it and consider it. And this deep level of consideration, I think, is an allowing. It's a true kindness in the way of ultra being that's going to allow for things, because we are very much a freedom-oriented species, where I describe as an emissary of this work, that I stand for something, that I want the ultimate for you, what's possible, right? It's a deep caring. And so if we can sort of refine it, and I call it a divining, because what else would this be when you have this open presence that's allowing for things to occur? Something that does generate, at least in my theory and my philosophy here, that is of this ultra beingness, that really is a pure intention of heart, getting closer to source, nature, to what you might call the universal, the divine. I call it like an egalitarian way of being, because it's enlightened. And what else would it be? Now, you see, that's the question, because I'm open to it, and I'm willing to explore it. So if we look at this fanning of the MEST and this generation of what it is, we can look at it from a coarser level of matter, energy, space, and time, and then also look at it from the psychic level, that there's something to consider in the matters of concern of today. What's the matter? And the emotional intelligence here that's informing our energy and the way of being, and the quality of our spatial considerations, which is relationship and a way of being in our time. We want to have a good time, a great time, right? A time that meant something. So I think this is a very significant construction of ideas. And this fanning, then, this geist of what is running things, we call it the spirit perhaps on this level. And again, I'm not attached to anything here, because I'm not, I'm not going for any particular tradition or defending some idea or religion at all in any sense of things, other than our conscious evolution, that there's a potential here, that we are evolving, just like we can see in our technological developments of the past a few decades to where things have gone in our civilization, society, given a very condensed short period of time. What's the next leap consciously where we need to go in order to have that desirable, equitable, sustainable future that's really what's needed right now? And it shows up in the quality of the way that our being. So I call it self-liberation to get out of our story. Selflib.org is what I'm looking to create, a self-liberation movement. And it's a movement towards something, excuse me. You believe it or not, I haven't had breakfast yet, but I've had my first cup of coffee. So the ideas here relating to this is that, well, I'm looking for something to explain this as explainers. So if we look at the spirit and something that's coming through the fan, so this geist, right? I call it, and this is just came up with this word yesterday, and I know I come up with a lot of words, but we need something to sort of create these analogies to better explain it. And it's not an acronym, it's just the word gust. Like, I know gust means like this sort of this gust of wind, right? A brief, significant burst of wind. But this gust, this fan, if you imagine, is blowing wind. It is a driver, it's a sail perhaps upon our soul, which is I, right? And there could be certain effects, but it is sort of the intake, and it's a correspondence, again, with the I on the MEST and the MEST on I. So whether things are taken in the way that they are, or they're messed up in the realm that people don't quite get it, so they're stuck in matters of concern, energy, space, and time, that's really not a great place to be, but it could be necessary for where they're at in their consciousness or level of intelligence. So the VLAG, which is this, I call it a negative spin, a disassociation, VLAG, V-A-L-A-G, V-A-L-A-G. The VLAG to me is vanity, anger, lust, attachment, and greed. And as that shows up and covers the MORB, the morbid aspect, because now I'm not even realizing my internal dialogues, but become morbid in that respect. The modus operandi of rational behavior, relational being, is caught in this identity that's really not itself, but it's adopted itself because it has some premise of existence, thinking that it's going to get something that's going to acknowledge itself because it's lacking so much of a greater demeanor. That, and to me, it really is a lack of maturity, or at least a lack of looking at my impacts and the quality of where I am in the MEST, and what am I creating? Am I generating more messed up things that are making things worse or harder for other people? Or am I having some sort of intelligent awakening where I'm able to use this conduit within the MEST to sort of consciously interact with things, at least in a way where I'm very gentle on things. So I have this allowingness, and this allowingness is the freedom to grow and to expand the horizon of intelligence and consciousness. That's where that's at. But this gust thing is the new thing that I've added. So the gust could be these experiences, a temporality of what's happened in the past, or just a situation we find ourselves right now. It is a quality of something of experience, but it's also informing the experience. It could be energizing the experience, and it could be formatting something that's going to come next because we're being blown in that certain direction, and for a hopeful, optimistic outcome or resolution, perhaps. And that would be perhaps a driver. And this is such a new idea, but again, listening to recent lectures, I'm trying to inform myself as like, okay, I might have ideas and I'm creating new concepts perhaps, but maybe there's something that was written about in the past, where they're talking about philosophies of the ancient Greeks or the Enlightenment period, and so I was listening recently to lectures of Hegel. That guy's pretty deep. Hegel not lecturing because there was no video capacity recording him, but philosophers or teachers, professors talking about his work and the importance of the Geist concept, like in the spirit of the time. And, I relatively know ein bisschen, very little German, but having that as a bit of a backdrop kind of helps inform maybe me explaining things a bit more in the realm where people kind of get it, but also takes my ideas or my own philosophy to the next level. And we're talking about the MEST. And so if things are messed up for people, how do we kind of help them through this conscious conversation, kind of realize their own impacts, not making them wrong, because people will react to that in a negative way, and you kind of more put them more in that corner, like pushing them down. They may push back, but they may be more defending what it was, that ego, that disassociation, that philog. And you lock them into that. You give them a life sentence because if you accuse them of something that, again, was only existing in the gust at that moment. And perhaps it took things really off kilter into a realm of negativity. But at the same time, we now have a new consideration here of this allowance is going to allow us to be free. We let it go, as Guy Finley would say, or Krishnamurti and other great teachers, that within the realm of freedom, we become free. So self-liberation, getting out of our stuck stories, and this limitation of what we impose upon ourselves as identity, which is maybe necessary for us to exist within the messed up realm. But idea is nothing more to me as internal dialogue. And if we awake to what we're saying to ourselves about ourselves, what we're interpreting other people are saying about ourselves, what we think, what's going on in the world, and just have an awakening to this, something occurs. And then we're better able to take on sort of the potential of what would be our destination, whether it be destiny or dharma. And that the flight we take every day, our TWA, thoughts, words, and actions become better informed because of this eye against the MEST backdrop is a bit more enlightened. That's it in that sense of taking advantage of the gust of this moment and a gust of fresh air. And this is where we have it. Again, this is what is going to be informing my work called the Grand Tour, grandtourideas.com. And many parts will be their own book about morbology, and egoism, which was very recent writing, egoism, so IGOISM.com. Go to that to read more about that, which is our projected ideas, not ego. It could be a component of what we perceive. And so there's an interplay perhaps of ego, but it's just what we imagine in our mind about ourselves. It's a selfie of the mind. I think it's an interesting concept. Why haven't anyone given it a name before? I don't know. Woo! All right, Mike Ratner, but in this world of the past, it's still New Year's. NewYear'sSuccess.com for those who are more goal-oriented or hoping this would have been a successful presentation. Hey, I've moved on. This is a new time, a new identity. All right, thanks very much. You can find my other writing at MikeRatner.com, MikeRatner, RATNER.com. And I hope you find it interesting, and looking forward to your feedback and taking these ideas to the next level. And if you're a book agent, get me a deal so I can get published, and thank you all much more. All right, I think we're good. Talk to you next time. GrandTourIdeas.com. Talk to you later. Best to you.